Welcome to the Grand Rounds for the Underground podcast. The views and opinions of the speakers are their own and do not represent anyone else's. Let's get to the podcast. Welcome to Grand Rounds for the Underground. Today we have Mike, my co-host, and we have John Dominguez on, and we're going to talk about the state of SOF medicine. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, covering a lot of ground. So yeah, hang tight and bear with us, and we'll try to get through this. All right. Welcome, John.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about talking about medicine today.
Tell us a little bit, who are you, John? I mean, we know who you are, but maybe there's someone in the audience that doesn't on the rare occasion.
Maybe one or two guys, but very little.
So I'm a retired Army Master Sergeant, former Special Operations Medic. I started my career in 1996. Very shortly after that, I was assigned to the 20th Combat Support Hospital and at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And just by chance, I was lucky enough to find my way into Special Operations, and I was at JSOC for my first assignment.
Wow.
As a augmentee, I ended up going in through a kind of an odd thing. I got put on a tasking to support a exercise, and I had and I didn't know at the time. I had a sergeant major ask me what my standard name line was. Remember that? Back when you would give your social security number, your name, unit phone number, and then if you had your personal home phone, because we didn't have cell phones back then. And about 4 months later, I got orders to go do an assessment, and then I ended up getting picked up, and we went ahead and started down a path of training that was not a formalized pipeline at the time, and did a lot of work with the counter CWMD type stuff. And you've got to remember, this is in the 90s. So we had the fall of the former Soviet Republic. And not only did we have a lot of weapons being sold on the black market abroad, but we also had a lot of activity in the Sudan that was impacting the world globally, as well as in the Middle East. At any given time, even today, there are several factions out there that are planning and operating non-governmental, affiliated organizations that we notice to be threats and we try to intervene on. We actually, in SOF, we have a presence globally, and we are constantly building rapport with our allies. And that's one of the unique things that SOF has always done as far as integrating and cross-training with our partner nation forces. This has built great relationships and strength. And who would have known that back in 2017, they would finally have a national national strategic strategy that called for integrated deterrence across the entire, globe. And the NATO alliance picked up on that, and also put that in their strategic defense strategy. But from there, I ended up leaving because I wanted to go either to the Ranger Regiment or to Special Forces. And when I left JSOC, I ended up spending some time on the 274th FST right at the time of, I think I got to that unit in late April, and then September 11th happened.
Wow.
And it wasn't just myself, but there was 4 of us that had left JSOC and all got put on that team. And Dr. Brian Burlingame ended up being the commander of that team. And when we ended up deploying to Uzbekistan in 2001, in November, we started taking our first casualties, and they were the ones that, you see in the movie Horse Soldiers.
Uh-huh.
And then on the 2nd of December, a firefight started around Shawali Kot in, which is South Kandahar. And we ended up, the firefight started on around December 2nd. They kept pushing December 3rd. They had the B team, and I even believe this, part of the C team reinforced them on the 4th. And then on the 5th, they called in air support, and a JDAM was dropped on them. So we had an element from Task Force Dagger, which I was with, and an element from Task Force Sword, flying 2 MC-130s to, at that time, Rhino. And we ended up, luckily on the ground, there were elements from A Squadron that went to go help but we ended up evacuating 77 casualties that day. and 22 of them ended up being KIAs or died of wounds later.
Wow.
There were several lessons learned during that evacuations that books had not covered. And in that time frame, we did the first in-flight surgeries in history. Now,
Wow.
this was a mission that had been conceived by Dr. Carl Savory and Dr. Carmelito Sonny Arcanel, who were the first and second Delta Force command surgeons and the first and second JSOC command surgeons. Although they had trained for this type of thing for years, and they actually did evacuate from Desert One because they were both in Operation Eagle Claw, several burn patients that were flown back to San Antonio. And there's a great history account of this, personal account that Dr. Carl Savory gives on this. You can go to type in Carl Savory's name and West Point, because the West Point Historical Society went ahead and did a trained person interview, and he covers some of this about what they had to go through and all the refueling stops. But those were non-surgical cases, whereas this was the first time actual surgery was done. And then we also gave blood, which at this point had not been done. And there was some issues with that as well. And some of the issues that came with that was that it was against the regulations.
Yes.
And by the book, there's lab officers that have, they've got their set of rules, and they, it'd be neglect if they didn't report that there was a violation of use. There was a little bit of a disagreement. Some things had to be investigated. But at the end of the day, that lieutenant colonel did the right thing by reporting it.
Yes.
People did not initially see anything beyond the violation of the regulations. However, in discussion with the tactical commanders and everyone else, we saved lives that day by what was executed. And therefore, regulations, they realized they needed to be modified. And that became an update started to happen, but it wasn't to where we're at today. But when you look at to where we're at today, that never would have happened.
John, real quick, the movie wasn't Horse Soldiers. It was called 12 Strong.
I'm sorry, 12 Strong.
I know what you meant.
Yeah. But so anyway, after that event happened, I came back and I went down the Ranger Regiment and ended up went through a rope and then went through a tree ranger. And during Ranger school, I ended up dislocating my elbow to the point to where I tore my medial condyle tendon, displaced ulnar nerve, had some serious nerve issues, and didn't have a really good outlook about recovery. But fortunately for me, special operations is a great place, and they'll get you healed up again. And they did. And so then I, at that time, even though I had gone through a lot of training at JSOC, I had not attended the special operations medic course yet. So then I attended it late. I went to that. And then by the time I finished that, I was so senior, it was kind of like, great, where are we going to put you? And so I ended up in civil affairs, which was it was interesting because at that time it was still filled with a bunch of 18 Deltas and 18 series across the board. And they were starting to be called back to group as group was standing up the 4th battalions. And they were looking for people that had, prior SOF experience or combat arms experience. And then the need started growing to the point because of GWAT that they made it its own regiment to where they needed, they would draw from the military and they would train you. The mission of civil affairs was just majorly held in the reserves, but the missions that they're saddled with are everything from combat operations to embassy missions, where they work with the U.S. Embassy and support not only the DoD objectives for that country, but also the State Department's objectives for that country. And so that is an interesting dynamic, and it's a great learning experience when you have to, because there is a military writing style and there is an FM on it. But there's also a different way to write when you're talking with other government agencies, and you have to understand how they work and how things should be written. So that way they are receptive. And then, of course, a third piece of this is when you are communicating with that nation, because they've got a particular way of receiving the message that you're sending to them. And so, we all get told about cultural sensitivities, and that is a very important thing to do, is study the culture of the place you're going if you can. But I stayed in civil affairs for a while, deployed a lot, to the point of where I got told I could not deploy or should not deploy. They moved me to remember back then they were tracking how many times you would deploy and what your home to deployment ratio time was. So I went to the schoolhouse as an LNO. And thanks to you, Rick, got to deploy again to Afghanistan for 3 weeks. And then I remember poor Colonel Lutz got a little talking to about letting me go again, because I had just been there for 4 months and I still hadn't had enough time at home yet.
Well, to be fair, back in those days, John, the whole dwell time, pillow time, nobody gave a shit as long as you do the job well.
That's true.
And you were.
Yeah. When I look back at how many countries I was at in a 20-year career, I just can't believe it, because, it wasn't just Afghanistan and Iraq. I think I went to Afghanistan twice, Iraq once, but then I was all through the Horn of Africa, all through Asia. Then for a good portion of my career, I was down through Central South America and the Caribbean. Yeah. With a lot of time in Honduras because of the Devaya brothers. And that was a great joint agency operation. And then I was down in Haiti for the earthquake that they had there.
Yeah. I don't remember.
I spent like 13 months. I spent like 13 months in the Philippines on another, deployment, but there's so many of them. And each of them had some
Keep in mind, John,
things.
that all those countries, you were called doctor. Every country except this country. But yes, all those countries. Yes.
Funny thing that you mentioned that, but I was in Africa. We were in Ethiopia, and we were in Addis, and we had some meetings with the embassy. And one of my teammates said, "Hey Doc, what time do you get out?" or something like that. And I told them, and then they're like, they didn't say anything to me when I was checking in, because we were both there at the check-in place. Well, I get my room key, I go into my room, and I get this huge suite, and I'm like, man, this is awesome. And I thought that this was, because it was an embassy approved hotel, I thought this was normal. So my team leader says, "Hey, we're gonna have a meeting. Let's just come down to my room." So I thought everybody got this type of room. I go down to his room, and it's just a normal room. So I was like, wow, are y'all's rooms like this, or did you guys do this on purpose to the team leader just to mess with them? And they're like, "No, our rooms are like this. Your room's not like this." I said, "No." So they all came up to my room.
John, you should have said, "Yes, my room is just like this."
Well, I was trying to be the good person, because I was like, I don't want to get, trouble, because I don't want them to charge me, way more.
Yeah.
So
John, no one will ever describe me as being the good person. So that's why I say that.
I was more worried about the government charging me personally.
That's true.
For this
and I agree. That's
they all came into my room and saw it, and like, what the heck? Well, I started realizing something. I was getting knocks on my door, towels, and like, no, I'm good. Okay, well, sir, I got a little cough. I've got this. And the staff, it was like I was constantly getting that. It was like at all hours of the night and day, and it was. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad they gave me this room. But then I ended up changing out with one of the other guys, because we would be gone during the day to the embassy for a little, for time, and we were only there for like a week on that trip. But they put me in the computer, and so every time I would go back to that hotel, they gave me that room. But that was the first time that I was really shocked. I thought everything was great until the second and third order effects started happening. And it all came from that one, friend of mine, teammate that called me Doc at the check-in desk. And
yes,
but it is funny. But to your point, that is exactly what ends up happening. So from the schoolhouse, I also ended up somehow. Oh, that was after that trip. They didn't think I had enough to do, so they made me the Force Modernization NCO. And so I ended up having to go to Fort Lee, Virginia, to take a couple of courses on capabilities development, requirements writing, military acquisitions process, which all those courses were very boring. However, I didn't realize how useful they were going to be, because of the fact that it really helped me to sit in places that would allow us to streamline and get what we needed in SOF and in the MES that's across all of SOF. But during this time frame, I was also on other committees like the TCCC committee as a subject matter expert. I was on the JMEC, which was the Joint Medical Enlisted Council. There was the Curriculum Evaluation Board for US SOCOM, where we would write questions and we would write the ATP manual, which now doesn't happen. And then there was
which is
one
a
other
travesty,
committee.
I might add.
It is.
Sorry to
Well,
interrupt.
they're-
Yes.
Yeah, no.
The schoolhouse is currently, they're currently trying to publish a SOCM manual. The idea is that this manual, the student will get issued when they start SOCM, and they take it with them throughout the course, and it's got all the references and everything they need. Yeah, I don't know where they're at with the publication of that. There's been some issues. I mean, we've spoken before about they were trying to go through Board and Institute, and I don't know where they're at. So anyway, we'll see.
And
And
just for
I'm also not surprised that nobody's asked me as a contractor in the building for over 10 years for input.
there's two things, and I'm going to touch on one of the things you just stated, but just for those that are watching, when we talked about and came up with the evolved from the TMAPs
Yes.
to the ATP, the purpose of the ATP handbook or manual was to be a study guide for the students that were going through the course to be able to pass the external examination.
Yes.
And it was supposed to be pocket sized, so you could study in the hallway or you could study, at odd times, but it was supposed to remain very
Concise.
Exactly. And it was supposed to be more of an outline and a quick reference. And for the graduate, it was a way for you to go ahead and review things that you may not have been as familiar with or you're not using all the time. So that way you could stay well-rounded in the basics.
With a pocket-sized, concise manual. And both my ex-wives understand what concise means.
Yeah. And the thing is that several people, have gone ahead and published other versions or similar versions of this. And it is not with what the schoolhouse, in line with what the schoolhouse teaches. And it can actually be detrimental to students going through. It can also be detrimental to experienced medics because it does not follow SOCOM's guidance.
Yes.
So hopefully, we'll be able to get this, other handbook sorted out, quickly. And there's a lot to be said. Some people are like, well, no one uses books anymore. You can get them online. You can do this. Well, yeah, you can. But you know what? You've got a problem. An actual handbook won't run out of batteries and Z out on you. It's not going to
emit
emit a signal.
USAC approved secret building, you can't have an electronic device unless you're one of those guys. So an actual book, I agree, John, and I'm an old guy. I like books, but a book comes in handy at those times too.
And, and I know you guys do this too, but this was something that my son came home with some biology homework, and it was he was studying the renal system, and I told him we were sitting at the dinner table, and I shouldn't say the dinner table. Actually, we were sitting in the breakfast area, and across is a bookshelf, and I said, "Hey, go get that manila colored book off that says anatomy and physiology on it." And I said, "Turn the page to chapter 7." And he goes and grabs it, and he's like, "Okay, chapter 7." I said, "Okay." I said, "Like 3 pages in, this is what you need." And he's like, "How'd you know that?" I said, "You see all those books on those shelves?" I said, "That's not a kit that I bought online on Amazon. I actually read those. Those were actually books that I had to read."
Yeah.
And
I didn't buy them to make me look smart. I bought them because I needed to be smart.
Absolutely. And and it's so funny that you can that I remember some pages on there or chapters, but it's easy to reference. But anyway, so back to what you had asked about my career. Once I ended up getting promoted to master sergeant, and I was the only one that got promoted that year. In SOF, let me put it this way, in the non-special mission unit, area of SOF. And there wasn't really a place for me to go. And I ended up, by chance, being able to go to Special Operations Command South, who had a provisional slot approved for a medic. And I finished out my career there, still staying on several committees. one of the things that I forgot to mention was when I was at JSOC in, I want to say it was in 1997. Yeah, it was December 97. I was luckily enough selected to go to SOMA for the first time. And one of my mentors was like, hey, you need to join this organization. And I said, okay. So I did. And I had continued to be a part of SOMA ever since.
Hey, John, who was that mentor by any chance?
It was Dr. Andy Pinard.
Okay.
And, he said, I know it's a little expensive, but it's worth it. And I said, okay. Well, back then, what I didn't realize is that you would pay for SOMA and you became a member. So when I saw the price, I was like, man, I'm gonna have to pay for this. But it was able to be claimed because it was included in the price of the conference. Well, over the years, regulations and policies changed, and you could no longer have a membership for an association coincide with the cost of attendance of a conference. So that had to be split. And just like in the 2000s, when they had the GSA issue in Las Vegas, where it was like $4,000 they spent on 46 people to have a GSA conference in Vegas, policies were put out for non-federal sponsored conferences and the tracking and cap of expenditures for those that would attend, which to this day, the Special Operations Medical Association is still dealing with. And hopefully within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to finally put this issue to bed by some legislation that may be coming out if it gets voted on appropriately. So like I said, I went down to SOC South in 2013 and I retired from there in 2016. And then after retirement, I I was employed with North American Rescue for about 5 years, which was a great way for me to understand the part that I had been missing. I had looked at things from the DoD point of view without understanding the industry point of view and how a little change that we decide to make that's the right thing, industry cannot lift and shift that way. Otherwise, they'll go broke. And unless the military is willing to sponsor or pay for some of these changes, it can really be detrimental. And there are things with companies that I had worked with when I was with North American Rescue that had won. They had proposed a specific device that met a requirement. They developed the device, and they knew that it was going to take them 2 to 3 years to develop the device. During the time that they were developing the device, committees and people decided that, hey, we needed, and this particular item I'm talking about was a fluid warmer. They decided, you know what, instead of just one unit being, that we need to be rewarmed, we need to do 2 units. Well, that wasn't what the original requirement was. This company made a mistake and said, okay, well, if this is what you want, we'll do it. What they should have done is ask the government to give them more money to meet the new requirement.
Right.
Or they should, at that time, at one of the milestones, the DoD should have said, well, we're going to stop you at this milestone and we're going to rebid or reissue for competition for 2 units. And then, unfortunately, and this hasn't just happened with this company, there's several companies that do this, where the government awards them a contract to do something. They come out with exactly what the government wanted. And the government's like, awesome. And they'll put it into the sets, kits, and outfits, give it an NSN. And then when you order stuff or when you get outfitted with things, they'll put that it's validated, it's approved, and it's funded. However, there's one last column, and that's whether or not it's going to be filled. And just because all those others are approved and it's funded doesn't mean it'll be filled when you get your refit. What ends up happening is it says, well, it'll be filled when you go to combat or when you deploy. And the reason they do this is because it could be an expensive item. However, if you don't train with that item, you end up having a detriment. So that doesn't, and here, there's many things the military does very well. And there's some things that the military does because the general culture is that once you have a system, everything can apply to that system. And unfortunately, logistics and medical supplies do not work like that. And the state of medicine is constantly in flux and changing, but the system that it's encumbered by doesn't support those advances. But one of the other things too is, and we all know this, no medic ever packs the same way. There's probably a standard that, you might have in some units, and then you add what you want. But going back to that day I was telling you about in 2001, you can't carry enough equipment, even with several physicians and medics, to handle casualties of those numbers. When you've got so many people surviving, the amount of pain medication that you need to have with you, the amount of antiemetics, it's and the fact that most of these things come in glass vials, and it is almost impossible to plan for those numbers and be able to carry it. It's just not practical, and especially in a combat situation where you have to be, smooth, agile, lightweight. Looking at a lot of the things that have come out of the Ukraine and other places, there's some great lessons learned, but those are unique environments that don't apply across all areas of the world. When we look at some of those lessons learned, there's some things that we have to remember in medicine, and that is, medicine is not the only mission. It is a tactical problem, and the mission is a tactical operation, not a medical operation. And a lot of times when we discuss planning, and I totally agree with this, is that, trauma patients need to get in front of a trauma surgeon as soon as possible. Now, we have looked at for years putting trauma surgeons as close to the casualties and shorten the distance in GWAT. Luckily, we owned the aviation assets that was non-contested to where they could pull patients out. But in the next conflict, looking at the number of casualties that we may sustain at multiple locations, we don't have that many trauma certified surgeons within the inventory. We also don't have that many general surgeons that could support large scale operations. So those times will end up being extended, and people say, well, you've got to plan for this. As we all know, you can be have the best laid out plan, but it doesn't survive first contact. Also, there's only certain
there's a balance. I mean, the farther you push those surgical assets forward, the more at risk they are. And when you are already at a limited number, there's a certain math that goes into that I don't think a lot of people realize. You want to try and mitigate some of this by adding training and capabilities onto medics, but then there's the are you adequately training them, and can they maintain that training, or do you have a way to ramp that training up before something like this happens? But at the end of the day, you can't plan for everything. At some point, you're going to go down your pace plan, and you're going to be past E, and you're going to be just doing the best you can, and it's going to be a bad day. And if you're really lucky, you're going to get through it, and then you go to therapy and you try to work that shit out.
And I know I love MASH as a TV series as much as everybody else and the movie, but it's unrealistic because they had 3 or 4 general surgeons, available close to the front lines all the time. We're never going to have that.
And unfortunately, a lot of the medical papers that get published, they look at it from the medical point of view only and not the tactical reality that you can have.
Yeah.
And when we teach planners, we teach them in scenarios where it's almost like medicine is the mission, and it is never that way. And there's so many factors, not to mention the fact that the last thing you want is to lose surgeons, lose nurses, lose PAs, nurse anesthetists, things of that nature. Lose medics, because it's hard to replace them. And to your point that you just brought up about losing medics, there needs to be a paradigm shift. yet again. There was a huge paradigm shift in GWAT where we had the IFAC, and now everyone carries the IFAC.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, when I first came in, it was like, I'm not carrying that IV bag, doc. That's yours. That's your stuff. Well, hey, this belt of ammo that I'm carrying for you is yours. So how about we talk about this? But the thing now is that I've been doing some research, and I am working with some people at JTS to try to find out if there's some data points that I can use that show the firefights where medics or corpsmen got injured early. Like if you remember, there was the third had Restrepo, which was an E4 medic
Yes.
that got killed on the onset.
Named Restrepo.
Mm-hmm. He here's the thing that I really didn't see that was focused on casualties that are taken after a medical corpsman gets injured. What is their probability to survive, and how does that affect preventable death on the battlefield?
Agreed.
And when we look at data points that are taken into the Joint Trauma Registry, that's the data point I think we're missing.
Yes.
Because, and the reason I'm speaking of this is when you made that comment, you cannot teach pharmacology to someone, and you can't teach somebody how to search through your aid bag and find the right syringe, the right needle, the right medication, depending on your state. And you might have an altered mental status. So it's going to be a detriment in theory, right? But we haven't written a paper or done any research to solidify that. So what's the answer in going forward to the future? We've asked a lot, and the more technology advances, utilizing everything from telemedicine to drones, we're asking more of the same amount of people to be proficient at.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not asked. So the next ask is that the non-medic become more proficient at doing medicine, because as a medic and a corpsman,
Mm-hmm.
you should have the availability to have the same standard of care that you give others if you're injured without being, overdosed. And this is an area where I think that it's crucial for us to look at and, for the future. But it seems like the medical community is so focused on looking at extended care, looking at prolonged field care, and improving medical skills, which I said already, we need to do. We need to have better medics.
Absolutely.
But who do we send to the front lines in the general purpose force? The youngest,
most fit.
people with the least amount of training.
Yes.
And least amount of experience. We need to find a way to invert that dynamic, the same way that we inverted that dynamic with learning that two large bore IVs open wide is not the way that we should do medicine.
Whoa. Is that new? Because I'm still doing two.
And the 2 liter challenge. 2 liter challenge.
1 liter each. Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry.
But the 2 liter challenge only belongs in college fraternities these days. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll buy that twice.
But one of the problems I think that's kind of systemic to these is kind of twofold. By the time someone matures enough to realize that there are these problems as a medic, I'm talking about a junior medic, they are looking for others to solve the problem for them instead of themselves saying, okay, I'm experiencing this problem. I know other people are experiencing this. How do I fix this? Instead of trying to pawn it off on someone else because you're too busy having fun as a medic or doing stuff, make this your project. And there's several ways to do that. I was very fortunate because of how my career started. I was surrounded by some very elite medics and doctors that were great mentors. And they basically told me a lot of things to do. I learned from them. I did what they told me as far as publishing, as far as what I should focus on. And it was great. And as far as how I should look at my career, which, by the way, I did not plan my career at all. I just was lucky or unlucky, and it just happened. I could never tell somebody how to have the same career that I did.
Yeah.
But when you look at the professional development model of the 18 Delta, at the rank of E8, the regiment doesn't see you as a medic anymore. And for some, they leave it behind happily, and for others, they maintain their skills and they go back to refresher. Like in special mission units, they will maintain their qualifications and certifications all the way through E9. But for others, they let them lapse. And then later on, we've got certain positions that are coded for 18 Zulus at the E9 level. And there's individuals out there that haven't touched medicine in probably about 10 years by the time they get to those positions, and are probably not the best suited for those positions. But the kind of like the inverse of that is if you stay focused on medicine, then you will get isolated and sometimes shunned, and therefore you won't be, you'll be committing career suicide. And the 68s
it depends on your career goals. So, I mean, some people want to make sergeant major. They want to, keep trying to create an E10 slot, whatever. They want to go up through the commands. Others maybe are just fine at that battalion medic, that 2-star command, 3-star command, SEMA position, and they're not really interested in going that command route or the staff sergeant major route. And you've got to plan your adventure accordingly.
And I agree.
Absolutely.
And some are just happy to being sergeant first class on a team, hoping not to make staff sergeant.
Yeah.
Let's be fair.
And if you know what the PD is and what the minimum standard, so you don't get QMP'd, and then the preferred standard for you to get promoted, and you just set yourself up for whichever path you want to do. I know I made E8. I had, I think, 19 years in the Army. So 19, I was almost 20 years when I made E8.
And, and I'll tell people this is sometimes when I'm happy with the things, I'm adaptable. I'm happy with the way things work out. Sometimes, when I was younger, I was like, I didn't get selected for this, or I'm not the guy that gets to go on this trip. I'm upset. But you know what? There's probably a reason for it. And if you just trust to go with the flow, something else,
absolutely,
will benefit you and present itself. And to your point, there's those people that want to eventually be, physician assistants, nurses, nurse anesthetists,
Which
physicians.
is amazing. You should always
Absolutely.
aspire to push yourself to all your limits. Absolutely.
And the great thing about it is that no matter what path you choose, you never lose the respect of your peers, because we all did this. We all started the same way.
We've all marched through the same mud.
Being an expert in your field, you can be an expert in your field at any level because you have had more time at that position or in that pursuit. There is never a bad path to choose. Just continue, but you've got to choose a path and continue on to be of value. And the 68 whiskeys, I was going to say, have or basically have the same problem, except for the fact that there's a difference between the 68 whiskey ones that are in whiskey fours that are in the soft side versus the general purpose force side, as to what is available to them and how the professional development model works for them. They don't turn into Zulus until sergeant major, but they aren't expected to keep up with credentialing at after E8 or at E8 and above.
To be fair, the good ones still do, and we all know the good ones.
Absolutely.
Yes.
They're to your point, sometimes it's difficult for those good ones that want to get the support from their command to do it, because it's like, you don't need to do that anymore. Well, that's very true. They don't need to. But at the same time, when things go really bad, and I'm referring specifically to an experience of mine during Roberts Ridge and what happened, during that whole 2 weeks of stuff. Yeah.
Leave it simple.
When things are going really bad, they look for basically two types of people. They look for shooters and they look for medics, because generally you've got a lot of people injured and you need the best, battlefield medicine, in the world is superior power, superior firepower.
Hell yeah.
So that's what they look for. And if you are, they don't care what your rank is. They don't care if you're a warrant officer now, or if you are, a MSC officer because you decided to go to become an MSC officer. If you're a prior medic, they're like, hey, we need, you to go on this. There's just too much to handle at this point. You're trying to arrest the mass casualty that is, currently ongoing, and try to gain control of the situation that is dynamic and almost uncontrollable. But I kind of want to change topics a little bit with something that, actually, it goes along with that a little bit. It's keeping the balance throughout your career between tactile competencies and, not only do you have to, shoot, move, and communicate, but maintain your, driving expertise. If you've gone driving schools or advanced negotiation, asset development, running your operational funding, your insertion and extraction techniques. Then you've got your medical competencies on top of that you've got to maintain and keep sharp on. And then you've got your family and health that you need to, look at as well. And then on top of all that, you've got to look at the professional development model so you can get promoted.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, in most of SOF, not all of it, but most of SOF, medics aren't just medics, they're also team members. You have certain units, a Ranger Regiment, their medics are medics, and they're amazing because of that. But when you talk about SF medics, civil affairs, you talk about some of these other organizations that are medics, they have other duties as well as being a medic on the team. Like you mentioned, the op fund. I remember Team Sergeant, like, Rick, why are you on a machine gun? Preventive medicine, Sarge. Why are you throwing grenades? Preventive medicine, Sarge.
Why are you carrying the fucking breaching shotgun? Because preventive medicine works. Yes.
That's the best preventive medicine, right? Who was it? Patton, he said, you win by making the other poor, SOB die for his country.
Yes.
Or his cause. Yeah. And that's really the truth. If you are overwhelmingly successful on your tactical assault, then you hopefully won't have that many casualties. But going into that, there's several opportunities that for people to maintain all this. It's just, there's some time management and you got to hit things a certain way. There's some complications, not easy, but then we wouldn't have selected or maintained being inside of the special operations community if it wasn't challenging to us.
Well, this kind of brings me to Doc mentioned during one of the BISC. Remember, we had the BISC before it became the Bragg, the Biomedical Research Initiative for SOCOM. We were talking about, I think, ultrasound, EFAST, ultrasound training. And the doc said, hey, why would you teach your medics this if you can't sustain that competency? And my reply was, I don't give a crap about sustaining it. I want them to be trained in this. And then we don't need to sustain that until their mission planning dictates that this skill set is going to be necessary again. Then we need a method to train them back up. So if downrange, I'm doing a skill that maybe I didn't train up. Well, we're on E on the PACE plan. My plan was to get them out, but here I have at least been introduced to that training. I may not be the best person. My P and my PACE plan was to get my patient to the best person, but something went wrong. At least I've had some training. I may be a bit rusty. I'm better than nothing. And when we look at our training, putting tools in the toolbox, we put a lot of tools in the toolbox. We don't expect them to maintain, 100% proficiency on everything all the time. That's impossible.
And to your point, if you have seen a few scans and you've got an idea of what to look for, when you see something extremely abnormal, it's like, it's going to jump out at you. And then, okay, I'm in a bad situation here. But if there's just like a little bit of blood in between the organs, you're like, I don't know. You're probably going to be okay. The patient's probably going to be okay. But once it gets extreme, you'll know. You'll see a huge, but that's the whole thing, is that you got to get introduced to it. And it's much easier to refresh a skill than it is to teach it initially.
So a lot less time.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
absolutely. And time is finite. Things I kind of wanted to bring up too about, we talked about mentoring, we talked about all these skills and all these competency and professionalism of our force. I've had a lot of people, since I've, been involved with the Special Operations Medical Association for so many years, tell me things that SOMA should be doing. a lot of times I kind of look back at them. I'm like, hey, that's great. Are you willing to help out? Are you willing to take point on this? Some will do it. The majority are like, will tell me they're too busy. But this is, SOMA was founded in order to increase the professionalism, medical knowledge, and also get the ground truth from the people that are doing the job to state what direction, what training, what education is needed. And without them taking ownership of that association from a junior rank and being part of being part of it. And people are like, well, no one's told, no one's asked me to be a part of it. Did anybody, to Mike's point, did anybody ask you to come into special operations? No, you did it on your own. Well,
you asked.
Come in on your own. Yeah, there's ways to volunteer, and you might be a senior person, but you may not be able, you may not get a senior position in SOMA, but start off, in a track and learn how a track works and what that entails. Then get to a committee, do a year or two on a committee, and then run for the board. Because if you understand how what it takes to put on just one track and the coordination, then you'll understand once you're on a committee how you're in charge of several different things that people are doing, and you'll respect the fact that
Yes,
they're having some issues with certain things, and not only monetary, but some people flake out, some people end up getting deployed, all kinds of things happen. And then when you're on the board, you will be able to integrate what the military is capable of supporting and what SOMA is capable of supporting in order to bring together a worthwhile conference. And one of the things I always tell people, by the bylaws of SOMA, 50% of the presentations are supposed to be enlisted driven.
mm-hmm.
However, we are limited to the fact that people
What's
don't
provided.
submit. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, only certain people sign up.
And the thing too is I've had a lot of people say, well, I don't want to go up there and not look professional, but we have a lot of people that will mentor you and we'll match you with somebody that will help you with your presentation, help you with your putting together your slides, your messaging. So that way you do look professional. And
it's the same with publishing in the JSOC.
Yes,
there are people
absolutely.
that'll help you so you don't look like a cretin.
Asshat. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that it's very easy to complain about something, but take it on, be the change. And you might find that along that path, as you start vocalizing it, you're going to have others that are experiencing the same thing. And from their foxhole, assist you in doing this and pursuing that change.
Yeah, that's good mentorship advice, period. I mean, throughout your career, when you're on a team, when you're a new guy, you're learning all the stuff and all that. And then you see some of the things you have trouble with, some of the things you wish were better. Now you get promoted up, or you're a company medic, you're a battalion medic. Start thinking of, hey, what do I wish this office would have done for me, and mentor those new medics coming in. And that's kind of throughout your career as you go on. Share those trials and tribulations that you went through and help make things better. Help those young new guys, fit in and do better as they progress. And they should do the same.
Yeah. But
Absolutely.
Some of that is like true ignorance. Like, I'm just here being the greatest medic I am at this level. I don't know how to do much. It's the senior guys that should be mentoring those guys. Like when the infamous Steve, president of SOMA, we'll just call him Steve because his name's Steve. When he said, "Hey, Mike, in 2015, need you to be the membership committee representative." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm in because you asked me and I respect you. I'm in, whatever you need." And it's a 2-year gig, and I've been doing it for 10 plus years because all the presidents, to include that guy right there, John Dominguez, has not fired me. Apparently, I'm not messing up enough to be fired. Ignorance isn't an excuse, but when somebody says, "Hey, we need you to step your game up," there's no other excuse than, yes, I can help. Help those below me, help those above me, help those at my level.
And one of the great things about SOMA is when you look at TCCC in 1996, after Frank Butler's paper, the 3 phases of care was put out, I want to say 97 is when we had like a little working group or a little committee informal that started. And then it over the years, it developed into a committee, and none of the services wanted to invest in it. And finally, SOCOM did. And then after it was seen to be not only successful, but it kind of proved itself, that's when the General Purpose Force came in and said, this should really fall underneath us. And it took off from there. And then when you look at several other things like the SOF to SOM, for people, for soft medics that wanted to become physicians. When you look about PFC, it was another thing that started like in 2012 when Sean Keenan, Paul Luce, Dennis Drema came on a little bit later. Yeah, they all came, and Jamie Reesberg, they all came in to discuss about support for this initiative. And, they had the 10 domains that they wanted to focus on. And someone was like, absolutely, we'll support you to do this. Same thing with some human performance. There's been so many different efforts that Soma has assisted people with for them to go down those roads that they wanted to see. And it's a great place to come.
When I was in Somalia in 92 as an infantryman, the ability to use tourniquets were the military standard, specifically Army, was direct pressure for 5 minutes. If that didn't work, direct pressure and elevation for 5 minutes. If that didn't work, Powerball and direct pressure for 5 minutes. And if direct pressure and Powerball and 5 minutes, so 20 minutes into it, if none of that worked, then and only then could you use a tourniquet. And then there was no commercially manufactured tourniquet, so you have to do combat arts and crafts and figure it out. Until Frank Butler, like you said, did the TCCC study that said, yo, this is important. Don't be a dickhead. Stop bleeding now.
So, Mike, you brought up a great point, and it was one of the things I kind of mentioned earlier about how myopic we look at solutions. That works for one patient, but can you imagine taking 20 minutes on one patient?
Yeah. Just to stop bleeding.
Yeah. And the thing is that I consider myself lucky and unlucky to be part of some mass casualties, and you don't have the time.
No.
That every minute you spend on one patient, that is a minute you're losing on several others.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that building, we build capacity through forward internal defense and training with our partner nations. We need to build capacity in our own teams, and we do it to a certain degree with TCCC. We need to reinforce it, because now one of the things that I've kind of seen, and I've seen it from the role that I'm currently in as the honorary sergeant major for the Army Medical Department Regiment, is that outside of the medical field, and even some people within the medical field, are very confused by the 4 tiers that TCCC has gone to. And when Russ Coltwalt did his paper on preventable death on the battlefield, there was one standard for TCCC.
Real quick, let's give a 5-second intro to Russ Coltwalt. And Bob Mabry. Those guys have been writing papers forever. Like, where did they start? Bob Mabry, infantry, Ranger, Somalia, blah, 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 SF medic, doctor. There's people in our community, the special operations medical community, that would love to help the young medic be better medics.
Absolutely. And these are people, both these people that we've mentioned are the type that will sit down and talk with you and help you, find the right path. And if they're not, if your path is not in line with what their expertise is, chances are they know the person that they can refer you to.
Yeah. There's zero ego. There's like, I can't help you. Take a left in Albuquerque. Go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, everyone will put you in contact with a path and help take care of you down that road. But when as we were talking about that whole myopic planning of that one patient and looking at the the battlefield of the future, with the TCCC being the way that it is currently, we can no longer make that statement. We know that the TCCC that was implemented throughout the force at that point in time works. And it also works, under those conditions that it was done under. But the thing is that some units are now using the bare minimum of tier 1, saying, well, this is all I need.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's just say you're a general officer. Do you need tier 1? Should you have tier 1? Are you in danger? Now, here's why I'm bringing this up. Recently we've had those incidents in California and in Chicago, and U.S. Army North and other elements have been deployed to those areas. And some general officers have been, asked to go to those areas. Well, now you've put them in a situation on those streets that they could find themselves in a elevated situation, just like we had, a couple of National Guard soldiers who were assaulted and one passed away. Should tier 1, should tier 1 be the right answer for those general officers, or should we require maybe tier 2? But here's the funny part: was tier 1 even meant for general officers, or was it meant for people that were not going to,
Above
be
general officers? Yes.
Exactly? And so this is where we have to really think about the changes we make. And in a time where we're not in conflict, there's a lot of people that may not understand that, hey, if you look at a chest seal just as a chest seal, as one device, is there not? Could it create a worse problem with a tension pneumothorax by creating it versus a vented chest seal? Or is a chest seal a multi-use item that could be used to close several different things?
Yeah.
And it's just like the same thing with, a Bogota bag, which is, I don't know if you guys are still teaching at the schoolhouse, but if you've got the way that, you get taught the basics of, you've got an open abdominal, evisceration here, you're going to use this green large dressing. But when you run out of those, if you've, got an IV bag, you can cut the inside sterile and staple it, or, making it improvised. And in some of the MASCALs, some of the stuff that you utilized was your t-shirt that you had underneath your uniform, or you had other things that you had to get creative on because you could not carry enough. And if you look at the aid bags that we were using in the 90s, they were huge. And then through the war, they became more of an assault type.
What? The M5, the canvas?
If you didn't carry the fucking Stomp 2, which was a whole rucksack by itself, like, are you a bitch? Like, I'm not a bitch. I carried it.
But
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
Rick, you were gonna say
but,
something.
but you talk about, the evolution of training and the environment that you're in. The big discussion now is tourniquets. So we've gone to, hey, when in doubt, tourniquet it out. And now it's like, hey, should everybody, if you're taught to put a tourniquet on, should you be taught to take it off, to convert it? And there's a big debate about that right now. And I can understand where that's coming from, because when I went through the 18 Delta course, this was pre-TCCC. This was, tourniquet, last resort, all the crazy stuff you've heard about. And
what did they say, Rick? They said, you put tourniquet on, and who takes it off?
A doctor.
Doctor.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. That's it.
And
only them.
If you put a tourniquet on, they're going to lose their leg. That's But I mean, when you look at that, even as a young 18 Delta, I looked at that and I'm like, it takes me 30 seconds to put a tourniquet on. It takes me 2 minutes to get a good pressure dressing on. Why would I not put a tourniquet on and then convert it later? Yes. That was kind of my thinking before TCCC actually codified all of that. There was a lot of us that thought that. They were like, hey, man, and we taught our teams that. We taught them, hey, do a tourniquet first. I'll fix it later. If it's not necessary, I'll take it off, whatever. And unfortunately, we're seeing situations where the medic may not be with certain members of the team, and now they're having to rely, and they may be hours to days from getting to a medic or higher care. So we have to relook at how we do the training, and it needs to coincide with the environment that you're sending soldiers into. That's my
So
opinion.
you brought up some great points. Yeah, you brought up some great points. A lot of the people that are debating about tourniquets right now, I think there have been two major mistakes that have been made. Number one, you have a lot of people that will go out to go do training in foreign countries, and you know what they teach people? Tourniquets. But they don't
Yes.
teach them how to remove them. They don't teach them they don't give them all the left and right limits of what can happen. But they come back to the US, because most of these people are US people that go and do these little things. And it's like, oh yeah, we taught Teachable C here. Great. But what level did you teach it? Did you teach it at a level that they understand how long they can have it, what can happen, A, B, C, or D? The second problem that we created is it's in the academia realm. There was a study, and I really can't remember who put it out, but in there it talked about how many tourniquets were put on incorrectly, that weren't necessary,
Yes, sir.
that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
However, in all their methods, they never took into account the tactical situation.
Yeah.
The battlefield is fluid.
Variables.
Yes, there's a lot of variables. A medic may not have put it on. It might have been a self, application. It also might have been an application by a non-medical person, and one of the conclusions that they concluded that it was a training and education issue. But like I said, the variable of combat was not taken into account because you may have gotten blown up, or they may need another gun in the fight. So you went ahead and proceeded to help, maintain the initiative of the assault or the gunfight. And then that patient was evacuated without you being able to put another set of hands on them to reassess or do anything. But and this is where in peacetime, and from that view where you're only looking at it from the medicine aspect, you don't take into account the variables of combat. And that is where I think that this tourniquet debate, even in some of those, because I've been into some of those debates, they are not talking about that. And when you bring it up, it's very dismissed, or just they get dismissive of those situations. And why? Because the majority of them don't have that experience.
Yeah.
And don't understand that speed is security. And sometimes you need to stop what you're doing and move the patient. And you may not get a chance to get back to that patient because of an evacuation or because of A, B, C, or D. And right now, we're making decisions about point of injury. And one of the things we've lacked for years is documentation, accurate documentation. Yes. And I know Tatrick for many years has looked at verbal devices, and they have not been able to make that work out. But we're not too far away. When I say that, I've looked at industry, and industry has some availability to do this. And I'm not talking with the stuff that you see on your phone with Siri that constantly gets your voice wrong. There are better things out there. Like when you think about Siri or the one for Android and blah, blah, those are the bare minimum. That's like, if you went to a flea market and got that technology. There's other technologies that are out there that are more expensive that actually have you read a paragraph. So that way the program can identify the speech impediments that we all have, that a speech pathologist could probably tell you if you ever got, and they integrate that. So that way they understand. And then the other problem too is that whenever we start talking to Siri about medical terms, like say we said epicondylitis, it is not going to put epicondylitis on there. You have to have the AI within that realm of verbiage and knowledge. There's some other factors, but in the next, I definitely see within the next 5 to 10 years, us being able to advance that point. However, that's going to be another power draw from some type of radio, or a device that we're going to have to carry amongst everything else that we've got to carry. And
well, Tatrick's working on a AI that will fill out your casualty card for you just by seeing through the camera and whatnot, what your hands are doing, what's going on with the patient, where the wounds are, and they're developing that, certain acts from what I hear.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, it's kind of funny because DARPA has a program, and I don't know if they're working with Tatrick on it as well, but that they're doing something similar to that. And so hopefully that'll come out. But here we are making decisions about point of injury care. But the majority of the panelists and the majority of the committees that are making these decisions are not a 50-50 split between medics that have firsthand experience versus theoretical retrospective data that has been acquired. You can write, just like we've talked about, you can write the perfect plan on paper, but in practice, does it work? So some evidence is the conclusions that can be drawn can be misleading. And I tell people this all the time, as much, I've experienced a lot of things, but other people have traveled in their career and they experience other things. So points of view definitely matter. And so none should be really dismissed, but we should, try to take as many in as we can. And right now, at point of injury, we're going to have to look at some empirical data versus, evidence-based data, because it doesn't fit neatly into the typical, PICO format and to the proper, types of studies that are available out there. And this brings me to another little point. When we look at special operations medicine, learning from our partner forces. And I don't know how many people know this or not, but NATO, or SOFCOM, I'm sorry, used to be NSHQ, NATO headquarters, NATO Special Operations Command, but SOFCOM is the new name, for it. There are several courses that they offer throughout the year, and you can actually host a course. US, they can go and participate. However, we very rarely do. And this is a great time not only to have a cohort of other of our NATO alliance partners together and learn what their capabilities are and understand the limitations that they have in aircraft or they might have in a maritime interdiction.
Even legal aspects from their home countries. I mean, when we were talking at the irregular warfare, medical get-togethers there, often as Americans, we're arrogant in that we think that we have the solution to other people's problems. And listening to people who this is very poignant to, when you're sitting there with the Polish, for instance, Russian invasion, Russia's on their border, and when you look at some of these other European nations, our Five Eyes allies, their situation is different. They have been thinking about this. They've been planning about this. But then you have some countries that their laws are, even Ukraine, once they were invaded, it took 9 months before they were allowed to push blood. Medics were allowed to push blood. That doesn't mean they weren't doing it, but legally they weren't allowed to until 9 months at post-invasion. So when we look at planning with those partner forces, we need to listen. We need to understand their perspective and together come up with a way to address those, not dismiss them.
And to your point, we've got so many medics and so many physicians that don't take advantage of those courses to understand. And really, U.S. is kind of far behind on a lot of things. Use of ketamine is one of them. But we all have different points. There's some countries where their physicians are not allowed to carry weapons. And so the availability for them to push them far forward, they become even more of a liability.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
If the dynamic of the environment changes, they don't have the survival skills and they don't have the availability to actually, take care of themselves. And then one of the things too that as you try to look at this is from a very high strategic level, how does our equipment interact with others? Can I put somebody in a Czech or hospital and have them work the equipment? Can they read the label on a medication from Singapore? The thing is that we are very I remember we used to talk about the ugly American, I'm here to save you type thing, but at the same time, we don't recognize our own faults. And people are very ready to go deploy to JSOC, but do a medical engagement in a foreign country and teach them how the Americans do it without realizing that it's not sustainable in that country.
Absolutely.
And they don't have an infrastructure. One of the other things about this is that, and this kind of leads me into something else, what kind of hurts us when we go into these foreign countries, And when I was at SOC South, I saw this a lot. Prior to going to SOC South, we would call the TSOCs and ask, for information, and they wouldn't really have a lot. But yet I would call a group and they would have some awesome, information that they could give me, that was recent, timely, relevant, and whatnot. Just like, I thought I could get hospital information from some of the TSOCs. I thought I could get some assessments.
Yeah.
They weren't there.
No.
And when I went to the TSOC, number one, I realized I fell into a TSOC that had not had a senior medic before. It had some reserve medics there that from the Navy. None of them, they would enjoy their time by going on exercises and maintaining a light sick call, but they didn't start any type of medical database that had all the hospitals mapped out and had points of contact and whatnot. Gene Hansen, who I brought in as an operations NCO, started doing that. Unfortunately, the command did not see the value in having that information for people to draw on. So it was on our system. And if you contacted Gene, he could give you the country studies and the stuff for all those places, but it wasn't put on either a SIPR side or NIPR side where the rest of the enterprise had access to it.
Yeah.
This is
I spent most of my time, in 7th Group, all my team time, and going to Southcom, and we never got anything from the TSOC as far as medical information for med planning and for operations. It was all stuff that we went and found ourselves. And
so
absolutely.
Right now, when I was there, we went through a manpower study, and I made sure I coded the position to be held by an 18 Delta, a Whiskey 1. I made sure that there were identifiers and things in there. I had called the Air Force. They, said that they wouldn't be able to support that. I called the MARSOC. They said they couldn't support because of their numbers. So I left it at those. Unfortunately, since I left, other manpower studies have happened, but also SOCOM, they did not own those positions. And Southcom, being a geographical command, didn't really see a difference between who would be in those positions. And right now, although we would like to think that, we would have people that were grew up in a soft command somewhere, whether it be, whichever service, we have several people that get selected for those positions that have 0 time in special operations. So they are learning as they go, and they are applying their, and these are very senior people. Usually they're, lieutenant colonels, some, usually major occasionally, and then, master sergeant to E9. But the thing is that without knowing how at least your own service soft unit works, let alone every soft unit and what they comprise of, what their mission, their core missions are, to be at that position as a senior person, you are a detriment to the forces that fall underneath you. You have no idea of what support they need. This is, in my opinion, it's a problem. Yeah, it's a problem in leadership. It's a problem in career paths, because if you look at SOCOM, for instance, every Air Force surgeon, that goes to that position, as soon as they finish that position, they pin a star. For the Navy and the Army, that is not true. For the Army, it's a career killer. I don't know how it is in the Navy, but I don't recall any Navy personnel that have had the job as a SOCOM surgeon that has promoted to a star or flag bullet. You look at these positions, and I know, like, from my perspective and several other people's, we've sacrificed our careers to do what we love doing and continuing to help people within the special operations community. And I'm 100% happy with that, because it was the job I loved doing, even sometimes when I hated the paperwork file that I had to do. And it seemed like every place that I went, there was more.
Right by the guys.
Yep. I was getting hit with manpower studies. I was getting hit with, SOPs or DSOPs or, different things that had to be rewritten and, or updated, or things that had to be created because they were never created before. And, so there's a lot, to be a good, a good service member across the board, you need to know the systems, everything from logistics to personnel to how you're going to maintain things. And I spent a lot of time on the manpower study. I actually included in my manpower study going to supply to get, paper for the printer, to go get printer cartridges, to go to the bathroom, to take out the garbage, every little thing, the hallway consults that would happen after staff meetings in order to justify that we needed more people. And then, on top of that, because the mission was easy, that was already handed down. But tacit little things that we take for granted were the pieces that you miss. But then, and don't get me wrong, just because I put them down there doesn't mean that you're going to get authorized more people. But if you keep them on there long enough, maybe in a time of growth, you will get those.
But you understand that, John, because you were enlisted and you understand how to manage lower enlisted. And don't get me wrong, my daughter's a pilot in the Air Force, and she's going to pin captain in March next year. So, yeah, good for her. However, officer pilots and officer doctors are not leaders. However, they use them in leadership capabilities. I mean, some of them are, but not all of them are. Later on in their career, when they're dictating policies, like, they don't understand until they talk to a John and a Rick that are senior enlisted guys. Well, nobody talks to Mike, but it says, this is what I need. How can I make this work? But they have to understand who they can funnel that information to. John and Rick, sorry. John and Rick.
Yeah.
No, not Mike. Yes. So yes. Rant complete. Sorry.
Having been involved in manpower surveys, you're absolutely right. You do all this work, all these write-ups to justify these positions, and then somebody just either doesn't approve them or they approve them, but they don't fund them, because that's a separate thing. Who would have thought? If you approve the position, I would think that would come with the funding for it. And then, but without funding, you can't hire for it. So now you got a position on the books that's not funded, which makes no sense. But that's how these things work. And if you don't know, you can't fight to get that ball over the goal line and get that win.
There's two things on that topic. One of them is the fact that anything you write, make sure you keep it for yourself, so that way you don't have to rewrite it later.
Yes,
or
sir.
that you can take key pieces of that to use in other things. And the second one I actually learned from Rocky Farr, and I applied it at SOC South because
Rocky Farr. Let's take a second.
I'm sorry.
God bless Rocky Farr. I mean, he's one of the OGs, truly OGs of the community. God bless you, Rocky Farr. Rest in peace.
Funny story about Rocky. He was one of my mentors and instructors. My dad was with him in Vietnam. My dad was a crew chief on UH-60s, not U-60s. They were the UH-1.
UH-1. Yeah, gotcha.
UH-1s. And he would fly Rocky and his team into Laos, and and then when Rocky went through med school. Yeah, when Rocky went through med school and then was teaching at the 300 F1 here in Texas, he went out and he ran into my dad somehow, and he's like, hey, I need to get my flight hours since I'm a flight surgeon. And so he would go and fly and sit in the aircraft just so that way he could get his flight hours and get paid. And when he passed away, we were talking about it, and my wife was like, wait a second, you both knew him? It's like, sweetheart, he was in for 47 years.
Yeah. A lot of people know him.
Everyone knows him. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
But but what you were saying, Rick, about the manpower study and whatnot, so this is a page I took from Rocky's book. So I was, at TSOC, you're authorized 5 active duty people, and then of course you've got your joint modified table distribution, your JTMD, where you can have some reserve. However, one of the things Rocky told me was, because when he was at SOCOM, he had a huge office of people filled, and so what he told me is that, hey, you've got what's on this, but you can always go and look and see the in and outs of different, grade plates of who is over strength. And if it doesn't cost too much, or if someone needs an internship or blah, 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 there's other ways to pull people down to work for you on someone else's dime. So I was authorized 5 people. I had 18 in the office
All right.
because
That's
they
right.
were
Rocky was an
overstrength.
OG.
Yep. And the funny part is I didn't just use Army. I used Navy. I used
Oh,
Air
yeah.
Force. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
pulled from everyone to help build SOC South because there was no way that I knew I could get, there's no way I could get everything done within the time frame that I had down there. But building capacity, right? And it was funny because the J1 got a little upset and they're like, these people, when their time is up, we're not going to be able to rehire for them. And I said, well, you're absolutely correct. But, and this was in a meeting because they were kind of ratting me out in front of the general. And the general said, I totally understand where you're coming from. However, I told Master John Dominguez to build me a clinic and to get us operationally capable. So he did exactly what I asked him to do. And, he's not going to need these people once everything is set up. So that's fine if we're going to lose him in 3 years. And so, and then he said, he's like, the only thing I'm going to ask is just let the J1 know before they just start showing up. Okay. But Rocky, and it was funny because my boss had not been in special operations before. And he was just kind of like, can we do this? And I said, well, let's see if it works. And if it works, then we can. If it doesn't work, then someone will stop it.
Well, we
But
can do it until someone makes us not do it.
But one of the things I also did is I attended the nominative sergeant major meeting for AMED, and I was invited, and I continued to attend while Sergeant Major Eckert was the AMED sergeant major, and he's the one who actually helped me with the Army G1 to be able to gain those extra people. And the great thing they got out of it, because it's part of their professional development model, was operations time at a command, and we had active operations going overseas. So the professional development they got was they weren't going to be able to get at other places at the grade plate that they were at. Not to mention the fact that they got some schools that they got to go to, and they returned to the force, more well-rounded, better trained. And we actually had one that he wanted to go to the 160th. He had his packet denied twice, and I made a phone call and said, hey, look, I know this guy is, an E5 and you guys aren't taking E5s right now, but, I sent him down to Paraguay on his own. And I will just tell you, I've sent him to several countries on his own. He is that competent. And they went ahead and made a exception. They went ahead and hired him. He went through SOCM, was the honor grad. Then after that, he went through Green Team and finished and got fully mission qualified in just under 2 years, which was he just hit everything right. He passed
record.
everything first time. Yeah. But there again, the stars lined up for him to have the pipeline.
So, John, you're saying that special operations is still a kind of name by name to name people thing? I mean, I agree. I nepotism, I'm not cool with. However, good dude with a good dude because you know a good dude and you are a good dude and can vouch for a good dude. Isn't that how we've made a lot of things happen?
And just so you know, all these people I pulled were non-special operations background
But
people.
still good dudes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I always say this, just because you're not in special operations, you're the only thing that I've ever seen is that you're limited by opportunities. And
Yes.
once you decide to make that choice to come into special operations, there's more opportunities afforded to you if you decide to take them. And like with this individual, he was going to get out of the military because the only job he wanted to do was go to the 160th. And he'd gotten denied twice. So he was like, I'm just doing this and then I'm going to get out. But, I told him, I said, hey, if you do a good job for me, then, I'll see what I can do. And he did. And this is where people that want to have those opportunities, a lot of us have the ability to kind of mentor them and tell them, hey, let me help you with this. And unfortunately, in his other jobs, he did not have someone who could make those phone calls and say, hey, look, I'm putting my reputation on this guy. He's going to do well for you.
That's a big thing, John. I'm willing to put my reputation, as shitty as mine is, not yours and Rick's, my reputation on somebody. Yes, that means something.
Absolutely. And I
But
tell
that
you,
also means they need to still volunteer and do their selection. Yes.
absolutely. essentially, you give them the opportunity, but it's on them to make it through everything. But yeah, so here's an interesting thing that we started talking about a little bit earlier, but we went down a different rabbit hole not too long ago. For those of you that may not know that are watching, there's been a push in the general purpose force to increase, not only to increase, but to because we have paramedics that are flight paramedics, but to have a paramedic with your combat arms units. And the reason being is because the level of expertise that can be there, it needs to be greater than what it is right now. Currently, we have the requirement of an EMT when you graduate your AIT training. Unfortunately,
to be fair, not certified as an EMT basic with the National Registry of EMTs. Yes.
So now we do teach them more because they get TCCC, and there is a little bit more advanced skills that they get.
Yeah.
However, those aren't really recognized in the civilian population. And when a lot of them get put in a unit, those basics that they learned are not reinforced. They're now granted, there are systems in place that will recertify them, but they're not getting the patient contacts. They're not getting the trauma. In a garrison environment, it's just, you've got your medical system that, they're supposed to fall under. And so then a lot of times that's where they go. The days of the battalion aid station have dwindled away in many places. So the mentorship isn't there. But we're looking at this as kind of to help address that issue. Now, it can't, it's not going to be paramedic for everybody. It's just going to be for these operationally combat arms, line units. This is a very big undertaking because it's going to increase the amount of education that's needed, the maintenance, and there's several things that go along with it. But
and maintaining.
Yeah, systemic skills that go along with that.
Yes, sir.
And some of these may be for the E5, E6 level, and then we will, once we start having them mentor some of the younger ones, and they get mentored into those positions, they will become senior NCOs or go off to PA school or nursing school or med school.
I'm going to age myself. What's the course from E4 to E5 nowadays?
What's the course?
Yeah, they like
the NCOES course.
BNOC, and then it was PNOC,
used to be PLDC. Now it's
PLDC,
Warrior Leader course.
Yeah, it's the Warrior Leader course.
Yeah, so Warrior Leader course. So maybe that for 68 Whiskeys, maybe that's the course where they added in, as you suggested, John.
The one issue with that is the time frame that of the time that they have for the Warrior Leader course, and then of course they do it a lot of times locally, like I did mine when I was at Fort Bragg. But one of the things is that along with this, we talked about NPI numbers. One for SOF, blanket, easy day, and then when I say easy day, it's easier for us to do because we have a smaller force and we can maintain visibility and within SOF.
Yeah.
Now within the general purpose force, this is something that has been discussed, and there's been a lot of people that have pushed back on this. Now, the funny part about this is that the Navy and Air Force, they're enlisted for the IDCs and the
IDMTs, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is Independent Duty Corpsman Navy, Independent Duty Medical Technician Air Force. Independent duty is the key phrase. Sorry, John.
Absolutely.
Lead in. Yeah.
And so the Army is the only one that doesn't have this. And why not? And I can tell you that from the conventional, or not conventional, but the general purpose force side, the majority of the people that will have an issue with this, they have a myriad of reasons, but none of those reasons are evidence-based. None of those reasons, if they apply to a medic, they probably apply or have been done by an officer at some point. Because everything from, the abuse potential. Well, we've had many levels of, medical officers that have abused, medications before. The if you look at it from a maturity standpoint, the misuse and accountability aspect, well, once you're dealing with a national, with an MPI number, just like a DEA number, you are now subject to laws outside the military. That is your life. That is your thing. If you are not mature enough to handle that, but yet we're going to give you a weapon, but we're still giving you these medications when you deploy. We're just saying that when you're back here, you can't use them, or you can't, gain for proficiency at these. If it's an educational issue, then what you're saying is we're not going to educate you to be proficient enough to do the downrange mission that you are going to be asked to do. So one of the soft truths, right? You cannot create,
Mass produce.
Mass produce soft, in a time of emergency. However, a lot of the planning that goes into general purpose force employment thinks that all these medics are competent to a specific level, and there is over the last 25 years, the only increase has been teachable C.
Yeah. But I mean, when you look at this, so this is a argument that we've had in the past with different types of controlled medicine. Hey, I don't think fentanyl should be in a medic's aid bag because there's a high potential for abuse. And my response is, hey, we have regulations, policies, SOPs to deal with that. You don't take the tool out of the toolbox because somebody might smash their thumb with it. You punish the ones that abuse it and make an example for the others, but you put safeguards in place and procedures. And it's the same with the MPI numbers. It's the same with adding a capability. You have to put the guardrails in there, the procedures to safeguard against misuse or abuse. But when we talk about an NPI number,
what is an NPI number, Rick? Let's go there. Let's go basics.
Yeah, I was to say,
or Rick or John, whoever.
Yeah.
It's a national provider identification number.
I agree.
So what is that used for?
It's used to write for non opiate type drugs. It's you're basically writing for your antibiotics, your antiparasitics, exactly, just general purpose, sick call type things.
So you can limit that according to position, scope of practice. So by title, you could inject a NPI that is specific for medics, for different types of medics, potentially. Is that correct?
And as John brought up non-off-cam or off-cam, whatever, he brought up that the Air Force independent duty medical technicians and the Navy independent duty corpsmen do have NPI numbers and can do these things. Yes, sir.
And so what I'm getting at is that NPI number, by having that, is something that's recognized by hospitals, military hospitals, and civilian. It makes it's something that they're comfortable and familiar with. So it makes that cross organization, that cross talk a little bit easier when you send a medic, a line medic, a soft medic to an MTF to do a rotation to get exposure to actual patients under supervision with an NPI number. They understand that. When you talk about civ-mil partnership, when you send them to an MPT rotation off base, that's another thing that they're familiar with. So these are things that,
absolutely, which is
they'd be more comfortable allowing them to do things.
Yes, sir.
Because that's defined in the NPI category that they're listed under. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, you are. And here's the thing. Let's talk about, we're talking the medicine piece. Let's talk about the business aspect of a hospital. You've got to create RVUs. You've got to be able to generate billing. This is where in the Army, we've never addressed this, and this is one of the key points, is that in the civilian sector with those partnerships, you have to be able to bill. So the partnerships that we have for the medics, a paramedic in pre-hospital insurance doesn't cover. It is one of those things that, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't cover. They cover it to a certain extent, right? But in the hospital, when you're actually generating, your ICD-10 codes, that's what's going to make things billable. So when you look at this from a point of view, we teach medics to do procedures like, finger thoracostomies. We do, crikes, blah, blah.
Do
These are all chargeable.
life-saving interventions regardless of how much it costs because it's military to military. Sorry, John. Just
Exactly.
had to add that.
So in order to, and we do, these are same procedures that are utilized in hospitals, but they get charged. When a medic does this, the billing, and you've got to follow the money. How is it able to be billed? Because are they, when you have a national provider index number, then you are considered someone who can do a procedure, and therefore it can be billed against, where if you don't, it's not. So this is why some of the limitations are there, because you need to have that, you need to be authorized to do it in order to generate the billing. And so I hate to say that it goes hand in hand, but it does. And so those are the kinds of things that when people will, talk about, why can't we do this? We can do this here. Well, there's not a civilian application for it. Is paramedic the right answer? No, it doesn't cover the full scope of what you're trained to do, but is the only civilian certification that encompasses it. And there have been debates about creating a type of paramedic, and we've seen the tactical paramedic, we've seen the community, blah, blah, blah. But, at the end of the day, they're all...
National Registry has talked about a military paramedic for 20 years and never came up with something. I agree.
Well, one reason they haven't come up with it, and, I've seen it over the years, is because the military cannot agree between all the services as to what that needs to be.
Agreed.
That being said, it's kind of funny to me, right? Because everyone goes, people go through med school. They go through med school and then they specialize. They get their residencies, blah, blah.
4 years of med scores and 3, 4, 5, 10, 8, whatever residency. Agreed. That's a standard. Yes, sir.
So now, in the paramedic world, we look at this, you've got your tactical paramedic, your flight paramedic, transport, community, blah, blah, blah. The question that I have, though, is that, is the Department of Transportation the right agency to manage the type of medic that the military is?
Well,
agreed.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're the right organization to manage the type of military medic, but I think that's echelons above what we actually have access and influence to.
Right. Agreed.
So for EMS, they are in charge of EMS. And when you look at the whole EMS system, for good or bad, that's just the way it's structured on the American side anyway. But I wouldn't put the military medics under that. But if you can have some sort of correlation, some sort of there has to be some sort of equivalency, and we don't have that yet.
So here's a funny thing. I think that military medics, some of them want to go ahead and go under that route. I think that's a viable path. But, in the United States, we have an access to care issue. And so therefore, we've got, just when you think about how many corpsmen and IDMTs are out, or, are retired, they don't practice medicine, or they go to another school to practice medicine. However, these are people that could very competently, because they already have their MPI, look at a position going into an urgent care or going into an ED to do fast track work and subsidize that. Now, the VA has started some program or started a program, to be able to try to facilitate that type of thing. But there again, in the Army, we are so far behind because we have no pathway to that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But that being said in itself, and think about the procedures also that, we get trained in that could be useful.
Yeah.
In those realms.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of things that can come out of this. However, let's look at something else for a second. And this is another thing that's going to be up at a higher level. You look at the joint trauma, the joint trauma system, and it falls underneath DHA. Is DHA the right place? Because here you have the DHA that reports to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. And when they make changes to tactical combat casualty care and want to implement them into the, Army, into the FORSCOM world, well, that falls underneath a different Assistant Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
So here you got one vertical trying to tell another vertical, hey, you need to implement this. Now, granted, at lower levels, it gets worked out. But for years, we had been trying to figure out how do we get this implemented into the general purpose force and make it accountable. But when you've got one assistant secretary of defense whose mission and readiness is looked at, and DHA, focuses, mostly on some research and, hospital medicine. Soft medicine and tactical medicine is almost its own specialty. And so therefore, you've got the combatant commander who owns tactical medicine when we're deployed. But then when you come back, for the, at least the 68 side, and then, for some of the interventions are held for SOF by, regulations and policies from the general purpose force. They are the ones that are responsible for the training, research, development, education of the medics for the
John, I got to stop you
medics.
here.
Mhm.
This is one of
Sure.
my red star clusters that fucking TCCC is owned by who?
The Joint Trauma System.
No, National Association of EMTs. They own TCCC. I hate that they do that because it's a military thing. A civilian organization owns the certification, right? And I'm talking about certification, not the ability. That irritates. That just gives me like rabies and spots. I don't like rabies.
So
Oh my gosh.
let me tell you, and this is something that you can look up. It's easy to do. If you type in uh, NAEMT tax return or whatnot, they're transparent on their stuff. So
Well, I agree.
you can see that, like in 2023, I think they reported it was either like $21 million of revenue, which of course they're a nonprofit, so it gets dispersed out. But they've got 14 courses that they offer, and there are costs to these courses to be able to be a site in order for you to maintain the books that are updated every few years and have the proper materials. And then of course they charge you for the course and the card and A, B, C, or D, right? And when I say they, there's independent companies that they validate or training sites that they validate in order to be able to do these things. They've got a great model that can draw revenue. But for out of the 14 or 15 courses that they have, TCCC is one of them. And for TCCC, they don't have to pay for a committee. They don't have to pay to arrange all of the information.
They don't have to produce the information. They don't have to update the information. It's all done by somebody else. And they take that and they make money off of it.
One of the funny things about this relationship is that they still charge the DoD for cards.
Yes, they do.
And
Sure, they do.
In all honesty, I'm surprised no one has really gone back and looked at this relationship and investigated it. But at the beginning, the way that this relationship started, Norm McSwain from NAEMT, who came up with PHTLS,
which is a good course.
Was brought in because Frank Butler, Holcomb, and a few others knew that in order for this to be able to be accepted by the military, there was going to have to be some type of acceptance in the civilian world. Because if you don't make it attainable to the civilian population, it's not going to get certified. No one's going to, people are going to just shun it because it's too elitist.
It's not going to be recognized.
Exactly. So when you look at the ATP, people are like, how come the ATP is not recognized? Because there is no equivalent on the civilian side.
It's made up.
Exactly.
Well, everything is made up.
Agreed, Rick. But I'm just saying, like, it's made up for us.
Yeah.
For us to say,
by
you're
us,
a SOCOM medic.
Yeah.
You are certified by us to do us stuff. No, I agree. Sorry,
if we made the ATP attainable, through a university, to the general public, you would see a huge shift because the insurance companies and everybody else would find a way to make it billable. They'd also find a way to go ahead and the universities would,
end up money off of it.
They'd make money off it, and then, it would be recognized and accepted. But because, that hasn't been done, we are still with the internal, we certify, kind of ourselves, even though it's kind of a third party type thing. But Looking back at the point that he brought up with the NAMT is that they just reprint what is given to them. And since updates from TCCC occur, once a year, every 2 years, I think the book is updated, and then you've got to rebuy the book.
Yeah.
But it's all available on Deployed Medicine regardless. And the slides are there. All the stuff that you need is there, and to be able to teach it and look at it. But there again, there's a difference between having knowledge about being able to do something, being certified to be able to do it, or licensed to be able to do it. Because you can be an autodidactic learner, which a lot of our community in special operations are.
Yeah.
We don't need to take a course because we're intelligent enough to read, and we're intelligent enough to talk to others that have those skill sets and be able to.
Or John, the other alternative is too stupid to quit.
That's very
We
true
understand
too.
that. But civilian certifications in relation to military certifications are apples and lead pipes sometimes when they should be more equivocal. And I know that's what you're talking about, and that's what you're pushing for.
But if you
And I
look at
agree.
it, and John, we've spoken about this before, when you have military training and then you get out, or you apply to a college, and there's the ACE accreditation, that recommends, hey, you're supposed to get so many college credits for this training that you've had in the military. But then you apply to this college and they don't accept most of those credits, and you have to wonder if there's an economic motivation there, that, hey, if I don't accept this guy's A&P, he has to take A&P through us, and we get the bill for that. Is there a certain, because some colleges are businesses.
Most, not some. Sorry.
Yeah, colleges are businesses and they want to make money. I get that. But you look at the disparity between what colleges accept credits for military training, which ones don't. There's a bill that's being proposed to address that. That if a university receives federal funding, that they'll have to accept the ACE accreditation for those credits for the training that the service member received in the military. I don't know if that has a chance in Hades of getting through, but I hope it does. I think that'd be great for our service members.
I think
Absolutely.
actually it does have a pretty good shot at getting through because of the amount of veterans that we have in both the House and the Senate right now.
Yes, sir.
And to your point about the funding for U.S. universities, and the reason I say U.S. universities is because Europe has a different standard when it comes to cost of their universities and who gets to attend. But it's funny, right? You can go to medical school at Harvard. You can go to medical school at University of Texas in Austin, right? You both graduate with a degree, and you both compete for residencies. You both have to take the same standard examinations. And when you complete your residencies, you both are physicians. What's the difference? One has a very large bill that they've got to pay back to Harvard,
Yeah.
whereas one has a lower bill that they've got to pay for University of Texas. How we talk about university prestige, but you and I, here's the funny thing. If you look at universities that have elite athletic programs, they tend to have more of a cost for academics. And so there is a disparity in that aspect. And by the way, if you are, let's just say you've accumulated enough hours to become a senior, and you've got, only 18 hours left to, 18 hours left to complete your degree. Most universities will mandate you to take a minimum of 30 hours to graduate from their university. And that's just another way for them to draw money. But you're 100% right. There was in the time before all these certifications, the time before, even paramedic, what you were able to do, it didn't matter. And on the battlefield, it doesn't matter. Can you save a life? Yes or no? There is no gray area. And that's where a lot of people don't understand that, where it's like, well, are you certified in this? Well, what does it matter? I know how to do I know how to do a time, a time test burn on a freaking, on a fuse. I know how to do this. Let's just go ahead and do it. Yeah, I haven't recerted in
Well, I
15
mean,
years, but let's go ahead and put this charge on there.
look at the PA program. It started from post-Vietnam medics having all of these experiences and training and knowledge, and they wanted to capitalize on that. So they developed the physician assistant to try to capitalize on that. It now is, instead of a little bit of training to kind of round them out, it's now a master's degree through the colleges, and that's kind of where we're at.
And so that's a great point you brought up. So you look at the evolution of the PA through Vietnam. Let's look let's look at the evolution of the combat medic. What certification and what further education has the combat medic, our frontline medic who takes care of the casualties that are in the immediate category? Where has the educational development been for them?
Nothing.
And
It's been a travesty.
I would argue that it is exponentially slower and further behind. And why is that? Because these are the ones that take care of the people that if they don't make it past, if they can't keep them alive, you're not going to get them to a surgeon. You're not going to get them to a higher level of care.
Yes, sir.
And as much as we know, the fact is been proven that the quicker to surgery, those assets may not always be there because they may get split between 3 or 4 different areas, and then you might have access denied. But it's not like everybody has a surgical team just waiting and dedicated to your mission. So planning works, but and let's go back to planning for a second because we didn't get in depth on this. How many people and how many Army planners can plan for an operation and think outside the box and say, hey, you know what? We're not too far from the coast. Let's see what naval assets are in the area and see if they can support or take casualties, because that might be a shorter flight than over land. And if so, can we get put that as part of the plan and contact them to be at part of this operation? And then if so, do they know, like, okay, by the book says they've got 4 surgical suites, right? But then you've got to know this other piece. It's like, well, do they have the ability, the personnel to manage those surgical suites? And if not, can we fly them in to be on there for this time frame in order to do this? And now let's take it a step further into the strategic level of, do they know how to plan for a surgical team from the UK or from Sweden or
But
blah blah?
I think,
Go ahead.
John, those surgical skills are definitely more, I'm trying to think the word, prevalent from your side of the fact that working with tier 1 surgical capabilities. The most a tier 2 medic be like, I don't know that stuff, but I agree. It's
Well,
And
important.
so,
but like
so
you're
this goes
saying,
back to
there's
what I was saying.
yeah, those
Yeah, well,
plugging in those elements from other nations that may be similar but not quite the same as ours.
Agreed.
Having that planner that understands that and understands those limitations and can try
The
to mitigate that.
SEMA officer and enlisted that understand that. Yes, sir.
and
Not
that's
to
one of those
cut you
things
off.
too. When we talked about the TSOCs, having a SEMA that understands the international piece is key. So that's why just putting a regular medic or a regular corpsman that doesn't have the experience there is detrimental to the entire AOR. And same thing with a medical planner. There aren't, a joint command is not just U.S., especially when you're working in another theater, or if you're like, if you're at, Army or UCOM or Army Europe or whatnot. You've got to be familiar with the countries and what they possess. And we don't have, in my opinion, we should have, before you get assigned to a theater command, you need to go ahead and have a pre-course to learn all the stuff that you need about those core countries you're going to be working with, and the capability to ensure that you have a competency of our own capabilities across all services in order to be able to provide the best planning and and have the most options available to you, because you don't know what you don't know. and on the job training is not the best way to deal with people's lives that are on the line.
How often have ignorance, not know what we don't know, have the three of us had to figure out stuff that it would be fantastic if we put this in a document or something where somebody could go, I'm young, I don't know, click, do this, snap, then do this, snap, then do this. I mean, correct?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things was lessons learned in GWAT, right? There were lessons to be recorded, but not reread because, I used to call this the Christopher Columbus syndrome. These people would go in and they would think, oh, this is the first time this is being done. No, this has been done a lot. You just are not aware of it.
Yes.
And then the way that the at that time frame, the search engines that the DoD invested in were horrible to be able to pull up that information. I think the next evolution of education is podcasts as well as audiobooks. And if we could
Yes, sir.
have these lessons learned where you could use AI to select operations that have been done, like in cartoon sedan over the last 20 years, blah, blah, you download them onto your phone or, onto your computer. And as you're flying over or doing whatever, you can go ahead and get that information and listen to it read to you versus you having to strain your eyes, stay up and
But we've covered a lot of stuff. We've covered a lot of history, some key points, some initiatives going forward. Yeah, I mean, is there anything that we missed that jumping out that you want to get in there, John?
One of the biggest things I think is that I definitely want to get out there is remain humble and never turn your back on somebody who has asked you for help. As busy as you may be, remember that little, that problem that seems minor to you is a big problem to them because they haven't solved it yet. And so take the time because it's worth it, even if it causes you a little bit more time to, set off what your priorities are, because that impact of that one person will affect multiple others as they go through their career.
Well, that's great. So I really appreciate you being on here, John. I'd like to, wrap this up, and I wish you all the best and stay in
Part
touch.
one up.
Yeah,
Part one up. Yeah, sure.
yeah, part one. But I wish you all the best and stay in touch. I'll be hitting you up for something here shortly.
Yes,
Absolutely.
sir.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. We'll see you next time.